Well, hello and welcome to another video by Financial Learning. On today's video, we're going to take a look at some reciprocal tariffs that just hit the market after hours today. These were imposed by Trump and the administration. We're going to see specifically how this may impact the Bitcoin mining sector, and then we're going to go into some details for CleanSpark to see just how are they prepared for this type of impact, what will it mean to them in terms of operations, as well as pretty much all the other Bitcoin mining sector. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, and let's break down these tariffs that just dropped this afternoon. So you can see the ones I have boxed in red. I'll explain why I have it like that. So if you look into some of these Bitcoin mining manufacturers, you're gonna find them situated in these key places like China, Malaysia, Singapore, United Arab Emirates, and Kazakhstan. And I'll show you exactly how I came up with this list in just a minute. But take a quick second, take a look at some of these numbers. You can see China sitting at a 34% reciprocal tariff, and that is on top of their 20%. That is some of the rumors, some of the conversations that have been going on so far. So that is a very significant amount of tariff tax that will be imposed on China. So looking down in Malaysia, 24%, Singapore at 10, not too bad, and United Arab Emirates also at 10, and then Kazakhstan at 27. So again, remember these numbers, pause it, screenshot it, do what you need to do. I won't be jumping back to this, but keep this in mind as we continue and talk about how these specific countries are going to be impacting the Bitcoin miners and potentially the Bitcoin mining sector. All right, let's take a look at some of the top Bitcoin miners available right now. And I got this from hashrateindex.com. You can see from a manufacturer standpoint, there's BITMAIN, MicroBT, Canaan, and also BitDeer. Now, let's talk about the countries that these specific miner manufacturers are located in. Starting with BITMAIN, their R&D center is in Singapore. They have locations in China and many other countries around the globe. I'm going to discuss them in a little bit more detail on a subsequent slide, so let's continue on. MicroBT, they are based out of China, Canaan, based out of Singapore, and BitDeer, also based out of Singapore. So we know the main countries. I'm sure there are other distribution centers and potentially some new manufacturing hubs popping up, but just to give you an idea, we are talking this is heavily based in the Asian countries. So you already saw a list of the tariffs, this reciprocal list of tariffs, how that's going to impact. I want to talk a little bit more on BITMAIN, and I want to do that because that is one of CleanSpark's major Bitcoin manufacturing distributor. So let's take a look at their specific company site and see exactly where they have locations. All right, and taking a look at BITMAIN, as I mentioned, their R&D center is listed in Singapore. This is off of their website. It says company's R&D center situated in Singapore, and it has multiple branches and subsidiaries across the globe, including but not limited to Hong Kong, China, the United States, Malaysia, United Arab Emirates, Lithuania, and Paraguay. So we're going to take a closer look at CleanSpark's contract to see exactly where these miners are coming from, how many miners do they have on order, what's remaining. Let's jump into all of those details right now. So on the SEC Edgar search, you can look up CleanSpark filings, and I was able to find one of their purchase agreements with BITMAIN. So let's jump into the details of this purchase agreement. I want to hop around to a couple others, and then I want to look at their latest earnings report to see just exactly how much is remaining in terms of commitments for purchase orders that are still ongoing. All right, and breaking down some of this purchase agreement, couple things I wanted to highlight. This is a pretty good table and there's a pretty good clause underneath. So these are actually for those S21 XP immersion miners. You can see there is a purchase order agreement for a total of 26,000 of these miners, giving them a total hash rate of 7.8 exahash per second. Again, this is the CleanSpark BITMAIN purchase agreement, and you can see the total purchase price was $167,700,000. Some really good information here is look at the shipping period. This was October of 2024 and November of 2024. So these immersion miners, we don't have to worry about them getting hit with the tariffs. They would have already been delivered to CleanSpark according to the purchase agreement. And we do know that they've already announced quite a bit of the immersion miners getting implemented in CleanSpark's fleet. But let's just take a look at the purchase agreement and understand a little bit more about the details of where these specific miners actually came from and what's the risk with the new tariffs if there's any additional call options to purchase more miners. So if you think about some of those tariffs, that's a decent amount of money that you'd be adding, and I will discuss that in a little bit more detail. I know some people are saying, well, what about the price guarantee and everything? That price is for the actual purchase of the equipment. The taxes, shipping, and other types of fees are exclusive of this fixed pricing agreement. However, don't worry, I want to go into those details. After going through all of this, I feel much better, but I will leave that up to each of you as we continue on. So continuing looking through the rest of this specific section here, I want to take a look at this clause. It says that BITMAIN represents that all products shall have a country of origin other than China and or any OFAC sanctioned country. Purchaser may reject any products with a country of origin inside China or any other OFAC sanctioned country, and BITMAIN shall replace and provide identical product manufactured in accordance herewithin per the inspection provisions set out in clause 4.3 of the agreement. So that's great news for CleanSpark. They don't have to worry about that significant tariff in terms of the China tariff on that reciprocal amount added to the already 20%. That would be a rather significant impact when it comes to the purchase agreement that they already have going on with BITMAIN. But let's continue on. They have other miners besides just the immersion ones. We'll take a look at the S21 Pros as well. But before we do, let's take a look and see just exactly what country of origin we should expect these miners to be coming from. All right, and country of origin, at least this is my own opinion. Love to hear from you all. But you can see here that the following are the initial addresses of each party. You can see Zach Bradford there, the CEO of CleanSpark, and they list that Nevada location. And then looking down at BITMAIN, they list Evan Hugh. And where is he from? He is from One Raffles Place, Singapore. So there you are, folks. A lot of these miners will be coming from the R&D center there at the BITMAIN location in Singapore. If you recall from that tariff table, Singapore had just a 10% tariff. So it was a rather large purchase amount for those immersion miners. And then there was all those S21 Pros as well. Let's take a look at that S21 Pro Purchase Agreement. And then let's take a look at that earnings report and see just how many more miners are left on this open order. All right, and breaking down the S21 Pros, first thing I want to point out is going to be that shipping period. You can see they had an equal amount of shipments. They actually requested that they receive them 1 month at a time in 6 different installments, and they asked to have them received between July 2024 and December 2024. So all these S21 Pros should already be in CleanSpark's hands. You can take a look at the total hash rate sitting at 23.4 exahash per second. We also had the immersion miners sitting up there as well in terms of hash rate. So that gives you a good idea of the overall amount of hash rate that CleanSpark's already ordered, already has on the books in-house. Of course, they already provide us that hash rate on their operational updates, but just to give you a good idea of the magnitude of the cost of the hash rate and just the efficiency of these miners, you can get a lot of that information from these purchase agreements. So you can see the total quantity of S21 Pro miners was 100,000 units, and the corresponding purchase price, again, this is for all of them, is $374.4 million. So these miners are not cheap, and that is why there is a depreciation amount. When you're looking at that cost to mine Bitcoin, they're able to take a rather large reduction in taxable income because of that. And they need to be able to refresh that fleet every 3 years. So you will see an increment of CapEx every 3 years as they continue kind of recycling their fleet. And as there are newer, more efficient ASIC miners available on the market, most likely CleanSpark will be taking advantage of those, just like they are with these immersion miners. So just take that into consideration when you're looking at pricing and you're looking at the different efficiencies here. As the global hash rate continues to increase, as more and more companies and more pools are getting together and adding more ASICs to the overall grid, we are seeing that global hash increase. So with that, the amount of Bitcoin per hash does go down. And because of that, the cost to mine the same amount of Bitcoin does go up, because in order to be able to keep that same Bitcoin quantity, you've got to plug in more miners. So your energy costs are going up. So I think it's important that CleanSpark is continuing to refresh their fleet with more and more efficient miners as they go. Those immersion miners are an excellent example of that efficiency uptick that CleanSpark is seeing. All right, and looking at CleanSpark's latest quarterly earnings report, and this is for that December 31st period, you can see here commitments and contingencies. So out of that, over $500 million of purchase agreements for these different BITMAIN miners, CleanSpark has just remaining $1,290,000. So knowing that the R&D center is located in Singapore, my assumption, my thoughts would be, if out of the 1.2 million, they still haven't purchased that. Because remember, we just finished an entire quarter since this earnings release. So for my knowledge, maybe CleanSpark's already taken advantage and already purchased these. They could have $0 left in commitment purchases, but just from what we have as investors, they got $1.29 million remaining. So with a 10% tariff in Singapore, you're looking at about $129,000 of additional fees that could be incurred on CleanSpark for the remaining of this purchase agreement. And again, they could have already purchased all of these within this last quarter. We won't know until the earnings comes out in May, or maybe if CleanSpark drops some information in our laps on this next press release when they release their March mining numbers. So overall, not too bad in terms of the tax impact, or the tariff impact, I should say, for CleanSpark when it comes to these different ASIC miners. We do know that they have a rather nicely refreshed fleet with these S21 Pros and these S21 XP immersion miners. So with all of those hooked into the grid and them continuing to tick up that exahash per second, they are still in a very good spot to be able to hit that 50 exahash per second by the end of June. And they did say they had enough money in the bank to get them over 60 exahash per second. Of course, there are some tariffs that we now have to be concerned with. So I don't know what type of impact that may have on some of their purchasing power, but we'll all just have to wait and see. I am rather happy to see that they took care of business and they already have a significant amount of their miners already purchased. I think where this will come into play is this fixed pricing agreement that they have. They will be able to purchase more of these S21 Pro miners or these 21 XP immersion miners from BITMAIN, but they will have most likely that 10% tariff. However, fun fact, you did see on the BITMAIN site that they do also have a facility in the United States. So let's take a look and see exactly what BITMAIN has going on here in the US. All right, BITMAIN did put this out on their social media site here on X. You can also find this information on various news sites, but I thought this was a pretty good summary. It says here, BITMAIN launching US production line. BITMAIN is thrilled to announce the launch of its new production line in the United States. The strategic move aims to provide faster response times and more efficient services to the North American customers. The first batch of anti-miner S21 Pros will be delivered this December, providing a significant boost to our partners' mining competitiveness. So again, that in my opinion is very important information when it comes to these tariffs. Of course, this is a production line, so I'm thinking they're assembling a lot of this equipment here in the United States. The actual chip manufacturing most likely is still going to be done overseas in their R&D center, but you will see a reduction in the amount of tariffs, as you're only going to have to import over that amount of raw material, those chips, from this Singapore location or other locations overseas. And then the cost of goods in terms of the assembling, all that's going to be done here in the United States. So that will reduce the tariff impact on these ASIC miners here in the States. All right, and there is one other item I did want to talk about in terms of the tariff impacts on these Bitcoin mining companies, and that is going to be the actual electricity. So where is that electricity being generated from? What type of fuel is it that is being used in these various states? That is very important because if there are any imports on that energy itself, if they're importing barrels of oil over or any gas from overseas, that would have an impact in terms of tariffs. So I took a look at Georgia Power because that is one of CleanSpark's major utility providers. And I asked the question, where do they receive the majority of their natural gas? And I got a good answer. It says that they receive most of this piped in from other states around, such as Alabama and South Carolina. And it states at the very bottom, no direct imports from foreign countries. So again, that is good news for CleanSpark. They are not going to have to worry about any tariffs on the fuel as well. So they should be able to keep their energy prices fixed, and they should have a rather minimal impact in the short term in terms of the Bitcoin miners and the tariff impact on those. Of course, in a few years from now, we're going to have to see how everything plays out. But for now, I feel rather confident in CleanSpark's operations. I don't think they're going to have any near-term impacts on this tariffs. And this is most likely the same for a lot of these other Bitcoin mining companies. I just took a quick deep dive into CleanSpark because I am an investor in the company and I do cover a lot of their information. So I figured I would do a good service to the investors and just share some of my research with you all. All right, and that wraps up for me. I hope you enjoyed this quick update from CleanSpark Inc., the whole Bitcoin mining sector really, when it comes to the tariffs that Trump just imposed today. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving it a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts about these tariffs. Do you think I'm missing any things in terms of how they will be impacting these Bitcoin miners? Love to get your thoughts on all this. And with all that said, hope you all have a great rest of the day. Keep calm, hash on, and I'll see you on the next one.